All right, we're almost ready to go. So, thank you for everyone who's joining today. I'm just going to get started here in just a few minutes. So, I'll make sure everyone has an opportunity to jump right in. If not, you'll be able to listen to this later. All right, that's enough waiting. We're going to get right started.
Don't take the lightning. Person got that lightning. Plasma in my vein.
All right, hello, and welcome to Taming Lightning live stream. I've done a couple of these over the last year or so. But the idea here is that we're going to jump into revisiting some of the content that I made earlier with Geeks, and we'll kind of get to that in just a moment. I'm Percy Eccles II. I'm the owner and founder of Taming Lightning, which started out as a podcast, and have grown this great interest in glass and plasma illuminated light. The first thing here we're going to have is a little sponsorship here. So today's sponsor is FMS Sign Products. FMS has been providing quality products for neon sign industry since 1946 and strives to support tube benders by making it quick and easy to purchase the materials they need. FMS offers a wide variety of readily available and competitively priced products, which can be purchased directly from their easy to use website. Don't need a whole box of tubing for your project? No problem. FMS can ship partial boxes and mix and match colors and sizes as needed. Shipping is secure and easy anywhere in the nation. Check out their website at fmsneon.com to see their full line of products and see how easy it is to have all your neon supplies shipped directly to your door. Again, visit fmsneon.com, spelled FMSNEON.com, for all your neon needs, and use promo code LIGHTNING at checkout to save 10% off your order. So, one of the things that's been great about working with something like FMS and many of the other sponsors is they're here for a couple different episodes, but I thought since there's such a big gap between the episodes they subscribed for, I thought it'd be helpful to get them out as much as possible for the sliding scale payment they provided. So, thank you, FMS Neon. So, we're all here for the Chapter Notes Plasma Primer live stream. And today's subject is going over some guides, which is the anatomy of plasma sculpture. So, what is the anatomy of plasma sculpture? What is these chapter notes? Well, I did a collaboration through Taming Lightning with GEEX called Intro to Plasma. This is something that took what I knew from plasma from 2015 to 2020. And my journey for plasma really began when I came here to Pittsburgh and working at the Pittsburgh Glass Center as a apprentice or technical apprentice, and now I'm more of an independent contractor now, and building out that equipment for neon and building on equipment to facilitate plasma. And so the purpose of this series and what I've done through chapter notes is to expand on those different, expand on that series, which is on YouTube for geeks, and take those different bits and pieces and start to pull them into smaller segments that I can use and other teachers can use for presentations when teaching workshops or long form classes, and to be able to use this as a way to break down the information into digestible chunks. So, what are we learning here with the chapter notes? We're here to discuss the difference between neon and plasma, get an overview on the scope of knowledge and skills involved in plasma sculpture, and to define a plasma vessel and the parts of the sculpture as a whole. To start out here, and I'll just kind of do a quick face cam here, real quick. What I'm putting before you guys is what I've sort of put together for myself. And what I hope I'm able to do is to be able to, as I introduce terminology, to define those as I understand it. And I welcome the opportunity for you, the viewer, to drop a comment to suggest maybe something different. And and even correct me, even that if that's the nature of what my statement has provided, because I want to be better and truer to what I present. And it's because plasma as an artwork, as an art form, has all these different related processes that work, and different people do the same thing. My main goal is to see if there's that middle path that allows us to understand how to do this properly and why it works. And so that's a job bigger than me. But I've learned from the community and what they provided, their insights, their knowledge, their experience, teaching and learning from to put this together. Um, and if you're joining me tonight, you can leave your concerns, your questions in the comments. I will get to them. I'd rather we do that at the end so I can get through the main bulk of what the presentation is about. Then we can return to those slides to address those questions properly. If there's something that I see that I may want to pick out of the chat here real quick, then maybe I will do that. But let's try to keep that towards the end. And I hope that we can start to get a more of a conversation happening. If not, you can still leave your comment there. I will address it in other forms as they come along. I'm going to remove myself from the screen here because I'm going to be blocking up the presentation. I don't want to leave the present. I don't want to shrink the presentation so you can see my face. I want you to be able to focus on the presentation itself, as this is something that people asked for me to do instead of looking at the slideshows on my website, which is available on taminglightning.net. So, what's the difference between neon signs and plasma? Well, we have two visual examples here, and we're going to use visuals primarily in this process. I do have a further explanation and sort of further delineation through the design theory, but this is just give us a baseline of what we're looking at. So, what is plasma? Plasma is a state of matter where a gas becomes a pool of charged particles. It is a heightened state that releases both heat and light. A term that is common with neon and plasma sculpture and fluorescent tubing and other lighting devices using gases is a gas discharge lamp. Now, I found that that sort of term was not very sexy because it's not, sometimes it's a gas discharge lamp, gas discharge tube, vacuum light tube, whatever it may be. And so when it comes to art, or rather glass art and glass making related to doing this type of artwork, I rather call it plasma light sculpture. And the reason why I do this is because when I looked up plasma art and you type that into Google, what you're going to get is people using plasma cutting tools in order to produce different metal shapes. They're using a plasma cutter to cut out metal if you look up plasma art. To add plasma light tells you the plasma related to light, and sculpture meaning you're using it for art purposes. I think it works. Most people agree with that. If you have any other sort of insight on that, please share in the comments. So these plasma light sculptures is a process in which you're working with blown glass to create a airtight sculpture and then fill that with various noble gases and to charge with electricity to produce a dynamic light. Now, some of the ways I tried to break it down is what is this plasma sculpture looking at it to understand what it could be. And while I list four different points, I think what really is its difference is, well, it can both be a linear or voluminous form. And I use voluminous to show that this could be a big tube, it could be a single small tube, but the idea is that you're changing that shape, that you're producing a different sort of visual out of the glass uh, shift glass form. We can understand that plasma is within both a low and high pressure range, meaning it's both a glow discharge and having arc discharge with various colors and expressions. We can say the plasma is a mixture of one or more gases with a single wire to a high voltage transformer. Most of this is going to be visual, and I'll show some examples here in the next slide of plasma light sculptures, one by Ed Kirshner and one by Harriet Swartzrock, both using some sort of shaped glass form, using the volume, using its internal geometry to create a pathway for these voluminous illuminations, and also using those constrictions as a way to direct the plasma. Again, more on the differences in this process when we look at the design theory next Friday. So, what is a neon sign then? Well, neon signage, is a craft that takes glass tubing and bends it to form words, imagery, and have also been used to express three-dimensional sculpture. As it relates to plasma, I consider a refined use of the noble gases to create a very bright light, meaning it has a process that is very similar. There may be very small differences that allows one to take a tube and process it to become illuminated. And this again is used in advertising, decoration, marketing, film, art, and design. And it's not limited by what we understand of the two gases that's used in neon. So, neon red is neon gas. If you want to have that bright color, that light blue color, you'll use argon with mercury vapor. But argon by itself creates a very dim lavender color. So most of the neon signage you'll see that has different colors, that will most likely be argon mercury. The red, the punchy red color, the beautiful red color is just a neon within maybe a clear tube and sometimes used creatively in other colored tubing or coated tubings. And we'll kind of get into a little bit talking about those coatings as phosphors further down in this presentation. So neon signage is known to be tubing in a linear element, going on a two-dimensional plane or three-dimensional. This can be this is the low pressure range, the 2 to 40 torr in a glow discharge range. And they use transformers of two wires with alternating current. Again, you can correct me if I'm saying some of these things wrong, but this is just giving you the very bare bone basics on what's happening in this process for the differences. Um, and most people think, oh, well, neon just has two gases and sometimes use mercury. Well, the difference when you talk about gases isn't very much. Right, we're using a lower pressure range, so it just glows. But there's been usage of mixing both neon and argon for various temperature uh, resilience, so cold weather and warm weather resilience. There's the use of helium gas to get your sort of peachy or yellow color. I've seen people use krypton and xenon for the wiggly lines to make very creative and dynamic stuff. The reason why you mostly see argon and neon, my best understanding, is that they're just most affordable and you're going to see most jobs requiring those. If you see people who are more creative, and that's pretty much the generations that we're seeing today, and even some in the past, some of the generation to help today's generation get along and get better, you see they've used various gases as well. So here's some examples of artistic and sculptural neon, showing you Megan Steeljes's work, where it's still two-dimensional, and then Michael Fleckner with his three-dimensional neon, and he's using a specialized transformer to get that sort of beading pattern. These works are these works in the previous were images provided by uh, the artist, and These works right now are from the Lit Light and Transmission exhibition that I curated for 2021 at the Pittsburgh Glass Center. So now we have the elements of plasma. So when I started out trying to understand the whole aspect of understand and begin my journey in plasma, I needed to create something for myself to really break down this sort of humongous set of knowledge and skills that were required in this process. And at this point, and I've shown this to various people in the field, various students, and pretty much everyone agrees that the terms I used to break it apart stand pretty strong. Again, if there's a better word for any of these, or you can add another category, comment below because I would love to hear that. So I break it into vessel crafting, technology, and alchemy. And just by looking at this visual chart, there's a lot of different considerations. They overlap to make this plasma lamp or this plasma light sculpture. And you can see there's overlaps, and these overlaps are related context for thinking about your sculpture. So let's use a simple one. Vessel crafting and alchemy. Vessel crafting is making the glass. Alchemy is filling it with gases to get your specialized effects. And so in the middle, we have phosphors, glass color, fill pressure, and gas recipe. The way you make the glass, whether it's colored or you're using a phosphor coating to get different expressions of color from the light being produced by the plasma, will affect your decision making on the gases. And what gases you have in your supply and your resources will determine whether or not you will explore glass color or phosphors. They're related, they're connected. And that's sort of the interesting thing I found when I started to put these different terms, which is no means a fully comprehensive list of terms or processes or techniques, but it gives you enough to kind of see there's a lot to learn here. And what I'm trying to say with this is that while you may come from the aspect of being just the artist making the glass, and you may have to work with someone to fill it, or you may have to work with another person to help you design the enclosement for the electronics, it does help to have a healthy respect and knowledge of all three categories. So let's break it down. So vessel crafting is the means and facilities and education materials and techniques related to glass making. This contains topics such as vessel shape, structure, size, choice of electrode, along with where you place your electrode on the piece. You can see the little chain bubble pieces I've done back in 2018, where I blow a glass bubble into welded chain, and then add the electrode at the end at the end of the process, and it just sticks out there. Alchemy. Alchemy is the means which pieces can be processed and filled for plasma, containing topics such as cleaning, adding phosphors, glass color, filling technique, and gas mixture recipes. So, how are you preparing your piece? What resources do you have before you? And if you understand what's happening in the process of making this thing light up or mixing these gases, um, and what you set before you, you can start to understand where your limits are. And when I say limits, it's not like a hard limit. And sort of one of the things that's been brought up recently is people want to understand how to navigate the process of preparing the vessel for filling with gases. Unlike neon, we're using an oven to heat the glass and heat the gases inside to relieve the moisture, to relieve any organic material inside. And so when I'm teaching, I'm not able to always have access to a kiln with a very timely manner, in a very timely manner to be able to process a whole bunch of pieces for a class of students. So this is another aspect that I've been thinking of navigating myself. But if we think about some of the resources we have before us, you could check out the Art of Plasma book by Wayne Stratman on taminglightning.net/store. And I'll kind of show that at the end of the presentation so you can see what I'm talking about. There's a chapter on that process of filling, the process of baking it out and explaining that. And I'd like to go a little bit deeper on what the book's provided. Technology, the facilities and the means to learn, educate, and practice processing and filling and finishing plasma sculpture, containing the topics of the vacuum manifold, gas transfer system, gauges, and equipment maintenance. Its use, transformers for plasma, which includes the considerations for resolving your sculptures aesthetically and safely. When I started to build on this knowledge, I worked at the Pittsburgh Glass Center. That provided me with a variety of resources that may not be available for a lot of people in other places. What I mean by that is the Pittsburgh Glass Center gave me a space which I could start building this. The grants helped me remodel the cart that I'm showing in this image and provide, let me go back here, sorry about that, and provide the ability to put this system together and upgrade it over time. So we're looking at the results of something in which I understand and have access to people who can do scientific glass, and they're not very far from the glass center, less than a mile on bike. I have access to swage lock, in which they can provide welded vacuum type machinery. And one of the workers there is someone who did the program for leak checking vacuum systems for for swage lock. So, and having access to swage lock allowed me to understand how to tube bend metal and use the various tools that I use to assemble and rebuild my setup. So that was very exciting to have these resources, and having flame working and glass working skill assisted me in this as well. So when it comes to starting this process, it's really understanding what your resources are. So now we're on to chapter 2 notes, Anatomy of Plasma Sculpture, second edition. What I've done since the Intro to Plasma series is try to break down some of the more key elements of the of the podcast series, the video series, and the recent update is to add tubulation. It's me learning from teaching other students what they feel or what they say that they understand and don't understand, and adding different elements and refining elements in the overview in order to sort of provide that context more properly. I have to remember I have to approach this process as if the person I'm teaching does not know anything at all. And do that in a way that helps them feel like it's comfortable to ask questions and to be able to do some research on their own, but also wouldn't feel uncomfortable reaching out to the community. So let's get right into it. So the first part is the glass envelope. I should probably go back. There's the glass envelope or vessel, tubulation, gas mixture, electrode, transformer, build, and assembly. And I'll be using the Cumulus Gone Nimbus Golden Dream as my example in this process. So the glass envelope or vessel, both vessel and envelope are used interchangeably within the context of plasma light sculpture, where a vessel, by definition, is a hollow container that can hold liquids or solids or gases, and then the envelope, originating from the subject of vacuum tubes or electric lights, can be defined as a sealable container that holds liquid, solids, or gases. Essentially, a vacuum sealable form made of glass. Why is glass important to our vessel or envelope? Well, glass is very important to this process because it transmits light, because we are making glass objects that are containing these gases and containing these lights. It has a high melting point, so it resists the heat of plasma. Plastics will not cut it. And is capable of, in quotations, permanently containing the gases. Depending on the gas and depending on the glass, there may be some things that don't stay in there forever. For example, borosilicate has a wider matrix to its structure. Therefore, something as small as helium will eventually absorb itself into the wall, if not exit the wall of glass again, over a very extenuous time period. But it does tell you that the type of glass does matter, and the density, say lead glass, may be much more preferable. And in order to effectively contain these gases and the resulting plasma, it must be an inert material like glass. Remember, if you're using things like plastics, common glues, epoxies, silicones, you're going to use something that doesn't have the properties to hold up against the heat or hold up against vacuum. Because when it gets exposed to vacuum or exposed to heat, it will break down and contaminate the glass vessel, just creating something where you spend a lot of effort to get nothing in the end. And we want our glass pieces to last, our plasma light sculptures to last as long as possible. So we want to be very intentional and sort of think about why we're using certain materials and try to use as much of the appropriate material or properties of materials to explore and to expand our horizons in glass making and artwork. Next, we have the tubulation. This is the thing I forgot to add because I sort of assumed people would know they needed a small tube to come off the vessel. But this is a great example using this piece because a tubulation is a small tube that can be easily sealed onto a vessel and acts as a pathway for air to be removed and so gas can enter. So when we're doing these processes, whether it's neon or plasma, we have to be able to evacuate the air inside and put in the gases that we want inside the piece. Here with borosilicate glass, I have a lot more control and freedom to do some amazing little properties in this process. So I create a little cinched section here that allows me to an easier time melting clothes to separate it from my vacuum system. So the tubulation with some neon electrodes, includes a small tubulation for easy evacuation, but mostly found in borosilicate will work with a glass maker to add one to the vessel. So if I have a borosilicate electrode, it's not going to have a little side arm or tube on it. So I would have to add it myself onto the actual electrode, which is I've done formerly, or more recently, when I was last doing this work, I put it on the end of the vessel so it could tip off and be seamless in the process. And more of the design aspect and processing and things like that will be more explored in the design theory presentation for next Friday. A gas mixture. This is the thing that everyone is super excited about because they want to make the glass object and they want it to light up and make this amazing, beautiful light. Everyone wants to make something that creates light. If you're attracted to fire, you're going to be attracted to glass. If you're attracted to the glass and you're attracted to fire, you want to make that light. So this is a process where we are cooking. We are looking at adding bits of gas at a time to sort of season to taste when cooking. And this includes a combination of noble gases such as helium, neon, argon, krypton, and xenon, and other gases such as oxygen and nitrogen. Sometimes people use things like sulfur-hexafluoride or halogens like iodine and bromine. This sort of idea brings us to the use of phosphors or colored glass. Both phosphors and colored glass will give you more color options, and these will influence your decisions for your gas mixtures. Let's talk about phosphors. Phosphors is a inert material that, under specific conditions, will emit a different color wavelength of light. Now, there's a bit more detail in that provided by Wayne Stratman's book, Art of Plasma. You can also see it on his website at stratman.com/phosphors. So, as I reiterate, many of the colors you see in neon come from phosphors that react to the UV emitted by argon and mercury. Plasma artists like Mundy Hepburn and Harriet Swartzrock will use phosphors in colored glass lamps that contain krypton and xenon for a similar effect. Sometimes you can get these UV emissions by using different combination of gases like argon and nitrogen. And I'd love to be able to get into some of these things because over the last 2 years, I've been trying to take a bit more and not better pictures of what students are doing and try to take as many notes as I can in order to kind of show how form and gas mixture can affect things and how much of the game of mixing gases is about knowing when to say when. Now, I mentioned halogens like iodine. So sometimes halogens like iodine are used, which, again, I have to reiterate and reinforce must be properly, if not carefully, handled. While it's not toxic like mercury, it is just as volatile. And most of the danger here is that you're going to contaminate your gauges, your metal component, your pump, and pumping oil. Meaning that the very little amount that you actually use in this process can be detrimental to your continuation of the process. Because these are halogens, they're very reactive. So, glass being as inert as possible, beauty is thy glass, um, it is not affected by it. It could be washed out using some sort of um, like a liquid, cleaning liquid, soap or acetone or isopropyl alcohol, or it could just be baked off the surface if it's borosilicate or soft glass. But things like metal, like stainless steel, even if it's a very resistive metal, it could be attacked by the vapor form of iodine, meaning it could take a very extenuous cleaning process or maybe even a replacement of parts that are affected, especially your gauges and your components like your pumping oil and things like that. I just want people to understand that if you're going to use this material, you must consult someone with experience and not do this alone. You want to make sure that you're not going to put yourself in the process where you start to, lose, a $400 work component because you were being reckless. But it's beautiful. And what it does is it creates a very beautiful icy blue line and wiggly line in your plasma, whether it's krypton or xenon. I've seen it used in neon and other combinations. It's quite fascinating. But most people will use this in combination with krypton or xenon.
On the table here are three glass tubes filled with various gases at low pressure and excited by electrodeless high frequency glow discharges.
And this is a video from Carl Willis. I would like to get him on the podcast to interview because he introduced a few cool stuff with his 2013 presentation. And now that he's kind of standing in one place now, I think it's a bit easier to contact him on the podcast. So I'm looking forward to trying to put in the effort to make that as something that's coming up. But check out his stuff; it's great.
The tube at the top, this one, contains pure krypton gas at 200 torr, and you'll notice that it forms a nice sort of white, maybe tinged with a little pink sort of filamentary discharge that has some diffuse spots in places where it kind of spreads out. So that's krypton at 200 torr. The tube in the middle contains krypton at 100 torr, but it also contains some iodine vapor at that element's vapor pressure at room temperature, which is about.
And if you want to check out more about that, just check out Carl Willis on his YouTube page. Thank you, Carl, for putting up this stuff online. It makes it easier for him to share and show people. So next part of the process, or next anatomy, or part of the plasma light sculpture is the electrode. In this example, I use a tungsten electrode made by Bruce Suba, something that's a bit more resistive to the use of iodine or things like that. And I liked it a lot more because it's a very compact electrode shape. And I do talk a little bit more about this in design theory when I talk about electrodes, as I start to, in my case, define what these different types of electrodes are. So we'll get to that subject at a different point. So an electrode is a conductor that carries electrical charge from the transformer to illuminate the gas mixture. It's important in the case of electrodes that you are matching your glass composition, as they can be purchased in both soda lime and borosilicate glass. Now, just because the electrode is soft glass doesn't mean it's compatible with every glass. In my case, I've used and I'm no shameless plug here, FMS Neon's or Burlight's soft glass electrodes, and it's worked on all the glasses I've used. I've had no issues with compatibility. That includes BOMA, that includes Spectrum, that includes System 96, that includes Glasma and Crystallica and spruce pine. So um, in this case, I would add additionally that if you are working to do any electrode attachments, um, doing a plasma piece in soft glass that you test it on like a simple bulb or a bubble that you blew, and then seal it on and see how it stands against the stresses. Is there, if it's possible, take that over to a polariscope and see how if there's any stresses produced by the type of glass. Borosilicate seems to be compatible with all types of borosilicate glass, so you're fairly safe fairly safe there. If you're looking for borosilicate electrodes and you're interested in doing some plasma stuff, you could hit up taminglightning.net/store. I'm selling both 12 mil and 16 mil electrodes. Sorry, gotta keep plugging it in. And then you have your transformer. In this example is Neon 21. This transformer supplies a high voltage, high frequency electricity to the electrode, and that excites the gas mixture. Um, you want to choose. This is a sort of a tricky subject in terms of plasma. I think I really want to update this slide to show that a bit more now that I think about it, but you want to use the appropriate transformer for the scale of your vessel and vice versa. When you're processing a piece and you're filling it with gases, you're going to have the electrode on that, you're going to have the transformer attached to the electrode that is most appropriate for its scale. For something the size of Golden Dream, which is like a kid's Nerf's football, the Neon 21 or the MK Midget from Tech 22 or the L7020 is appropriate for that scale. But even if you have that power supply, you're still dialing in when you're adding those gases so that they match and work well together. The thing is, if you have too much power in a small in the scale of the object, it's going to heat up the glass, possibly cracking it, or overheat the transformer itself. And if you don't have enough power, well, then you're not going to have either it's not going to light up or it's going to light up very little compared to the scale and volume of your piece. Um, Terminology for this is very kind of difficult. I, we call them transformers, we call them power supplies, but we have to also understand that power supply is also the term used for what supplies the power to your transformer. In the case of the Neon 21 in this example, you have the transformer and you need a wall adapter that holds the that provides for goes from 110 to 12 volts or 14 volts. There are models like the Tech 22 L7020, which is all in one. You plug it in a wall, it provides power. The problem with that is that we also have to consider a good practice of having a power supply or transformer that works on both 110 and 220 outlets. When I was teaching with Ed Kirshner in Sweden in 2019, and that we also co-taught with Jaime Guerrero. I don't want to forget too many people here. We had an issue with that regarding the Tech 22 L7020 and the PVM 12 and PVM 400 from the now out of business Information Unlimited. And the only solution for that, if you don't have something that's built in to switch between those different power voltages, say you're exhibiting work in different countries, then it's good to have a converter and have a sleek converter in that process to plug into that works. Things that need power, like electronic stuff, always has a bit of a troubleshooting that has to go with it. But that's not a con. That's not a detriment. That is something to encourage creative problem solving. And then the build and assembly. Your build and assembly, and I wish there was a better term for this. I don't want to call it just display. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. Are your considerations that are made when determining where and how you present your finished work. How do you bring together the glass component with the electronics in a safe and aesthetic way that matches your needs for the artwork itself? Are you using non-conductive materials? Or using some sort of insulation? Are you also using materials that are fire retardant or providing some sort of coating on the inside that can be fire retardant in case there is an issue, an electrical issue that could happen that causes something to catch fire. Um, these are important things. If you're using something that's metal, are you grounding that thing properly? And are, again, still insulating, because you could possibly shock someone, right? Um, and then these processes for plasma light sculpture requires electricity. And so if you don't like cords, wires, or electrodes being visible, you have very limited choices. You have the ability to hide or integrate that into the sculpture. You have what you could ignore it, just accept it's part of it, um, or you can embellish it, which may sound similar to hiding or integrating, but it's just kind of making it more. And number two from this, I talk a lot more about it in design theory, because while this seems really poignant and kind of blaming the artist for not, liking these things, you as a creative are here to create that possibility. So um, it's something you have to accept in that process. This includes if you have some sort of mechanism for using solar panels, or if you use a battery pack. If you use a battery pack, number three, with so many components that wear with use or break and transport, it's a good idea to make your piece easy to install and simple to fix. So if someone needs to charge it, is your design for charging that battery accessible and reduces any chance of someone breaking it because it's difficult? Making things easy always takes a long time. And I maybe I'll show this in the last slide, not the last slide, but the last presentation that I do. But I'm going to show you how I went through a process of making artwork for plasma as I try to record every bit of it. But also talk about, like, even today I go back to that same artwork and I try to improve it. So how do I make this object easier for someone else to install? Because in the future, I'm not going to be able to travel everywhere this piece needs to go. In the future, I can hope that there's someone in the location I'm showing that could be my call person to install. In the future, I could hope that I make everything as simple as possible, direction wise and install wise, that someone can install without needing to have a specialist there. And that's what I'm hoping we can build towards as we start to kind of break these down into further pieces. So back to our screen here. Questions? Please ask. Comments? I don't see any comments here either. But that's it. That is the anatomy of plasma sculpture. Glass envelope, gas mixture, electrode, transformer, and build and assembly. I'm going to give you a moment, give you like 5 minutes, see if there's anyone who wants to drop anything in the chat. And I hope to be able to help answer some of those questions while we're on live. All right, I don't want to waste too much of anyone's time. So there's a couple of people that checked out. No worries there. If you'll be able to have opportunity to check this stuff out after after the podcast here. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to go and check out a website for you guys to look at. And we're going to put it up on the screen here in just a moment so I can show you some resources for you. So I'm going to go to my website, taminglightning.net. Hoping I can get this thing to transition right. It's been a while since I've done live stream here with OBS, so bear with me for just a moment. All right, so we are looking at taminglightning.net, your nexus for art, science, and history of plasma light art. And yeah, what we're doing today, we were looking at the plasma primer. So if you type that in, I'm going to put a little button here so you can see it later on. But plasma primer is sort of my learning resource. This is what these lectures will be based off of. And you can find all of them here. But if you're looking for other resources like the store, here we contain a lot of different parts, pieces, supplies for plasma, and Taming Lightning merch, whatnot. So we got our transformers, the last stock of the Neon 21s, got your borosilicate electrodes. But here you can purchase the Art of Plasma, creating created lighted sculpture with gas, glass, and electricity by Wayne Strapman. In this book, it contains a pretty nice overview of the entire process of plasma, from the manifolds and whatnot. Um, it does require, and there's nothing against Wayne Strapman, it does require a bit more um, uh, practice experience to use it very well. But if you're looking for something in your resource book, I recommend purchasing this book by Wayne Strapman. I used it during my classes this past summer in order to show students stuff that I didn't already have presentations prepared for. Um, and what I hope to do with this book in the future is kind of go back through and start to push through on certain parts with more elaboration, which I find is helpful. I mean, Wayne Stratman's been one of my mentors in this process, so it's been helpful to do that as well. If you want to support Taming Lightning, you can do so through Patreon. Patreon allows me to basically keep everything going and glowing with Taming Lightning. So it pays for, hosting the podcast, allows me to pay for some of the different programs I use for, Adobe. I use Adobe Audition, Premiere, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, as I'm doing a book design right now for some guides that people will want to use or may want to use for glass soldering for plasma and things like that. And then, you can sign up for the email list for Taming Lightning, scan the code, go to taminglightning.net and subscribe to the mailing list. That's very helpful. You'll get updates on classes, you'll get updates on store items, podcast, anything else that you may be interested in. It's one of the ways that people help communicate with me about what they want or what they need or have questions about, and gives you a resource to different places as well. And let me try to find one more slide here. I'm going to just close out with the schedule here. So let me try to find that real quick. All right, so last slide. All right, so today we did Anatomy of Plasma Sculpture, second edition. Next Friday, January 19th, same time, Design Theory and Plasma Light Sculpture. We'll be looking at the biggest overview I've ever done for plasma. You're looking at things like the different types of discharges, how geometry affects these discharges, how gases flow to different pieces. We'll be looking at a string of different pieces of sculpture using the same mixture and be able to observe what's happening with constricted and open areas in this piece, where arcs or streams of light are formed not just by how much gas is in there, but how they are compressed through constrictions. Um, and we'll also look at different types of electrodes as I try to map out all these different works that people showed me in their process. Um, it's a lot. It is a lot both in terms of defining the different types of lighting effects. It's a lot in terms of just understanding the basic principles of the sculpture itself and defining those, having your vision and sort of working through all this terminology. It gives you a really good idea of what you're dealing with when you're designing work for plasma. I've used that in my consultation with several artists, and they found it was helpful. And so I want to share this with you guys again. Um, it's those of this community who've asked me when I've asked, would it be helpful if I did a live stream for these presentations? And that's what we got here. We also have plasma guidelines for vessel structure. So after you've understand what the anatomy of the sculpture is, now do you understand sort of the design aspect of plasma light sculptures? Now it's about the structure because this is the part that keeps you safe and it keeps everyone else safe. It makes you more successful and I think it makes you more understanding of the craft, the materiality, and the shaping of the material glass. And I think it gives us a common vocabulary when we want to have someone else make the glass work for us, because that's just as important. You know, there's artists that can make glass for themselves. There's artists that have other people make it for them, and both are valid positions in this art, no doubt about that. Thank you guys for joining me today for Plasma Primer chapter notes on the anatomy of plasma sculpture. As always, be safe, be healthy, and be curious. And I'll see you next time.